All right. Hi, everybody. This is Derwinski. I'm making a video about the Cajun Gunworks Ultra-lite self-defense kit, which is, you can see that. I know it's probably kind of hard to see, but what we're doing is we're going to replace the mainspring and the firing pin and firing pin spring and firing pin block spring. What we're doing is we're going to reduce the trigger pull on this stock CZ75. This CZ75B is my USPSA pistol. I've been shooting it now since about 2006 is when I bought it. It's got about 20,000 rounds roughly through it, so it's well broke in, and the trigger's not bad, considering it's pretty much bone stock. So the trigger parts have been fairly well smooth with shooting a lot of rounds through it. So what we're going to do is just reduce that double action trigger pull. And what I'm going to do first, before we start this, and like I said, this is stock. This is as I bought it in 2006. The only thing that's been replaced is the trigger return spring, which broke about 2,000 rounds ago at about 18,000 rounds. And what I've got here is a fish scale. I know it's kind of hard to see, but we're going to get a baseline measurement on what the double action pull is. And I've got a fancy high-tech trigger pull. This is a fish scale, and these are pipe cleaners. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie these up, and I'm going to take a baseline trigger pull measurement. I know this is terribly high tech, but you know, it will work. Okay, so what we've got here is, I'm going to watch this fish scale. You're probably not going to be able to see it very well, but we're going to give it a pull. There's 5 pounds. There's 10 pounds. It's just now starting to move the trigger. So the double action trigger pull on this is right now. Whoop. Hold out. The double action trigger pull is about 11 pounds. I've heard that some stock pulls are even worse than that, at 16 to 8 pounds. And supposedly the stock mainspring is a 20-pound hammer spring. But the most I can get out of this one, like I said, this one's been fairly well smoothed over by quite a bit of use. So about 10 pounds right now is the double action pull. Roughly. And the single action pull is right about 5 pounds. I don't think this scale is super accurate. So fully cocked. Yeah, that's not too bad. And that's not too bad for a stock single action pull. There's 3 pounds. There's 3.5 pounds. I don't know how, this scale is probably not exactly right, but I would guess probably about 5 pounds is the single action pull, and right now about 10 pounds. So we're gonna see after installing this kit what the how it will help that double action pull. Right now it's tolerable, not too bad. But I'm going to start out, this gun is clear. I don't know if I showed you that, but no magazine. So always make sure your firearm is clear before you start working on it. Anyway, so where we're going to start with this is basic field strip. Super easy way. I pull it to half cock, push back the slide, and there's 2 little notches. I don't know if you can see those notches on there. There's 2 little notches you line up, and then we're push the slide stop out, pull it, there's the slide stop, and there's our barrel. So now we've got 2 parts here. This is the recoil spring, and the barrel comes right out. And now we have our slide. Now, like I said, my only non-stock item in there is the sights. I've got some LPA adjustable sights with fiber optic dots in them, which I kind of like. Red in the front and green in the back. But anyway, once we've got that done, the first thing we're going to do is put in the new mainspring. And where we start with that is we're going to start disassembling the lower half of this pistol. Take the grips off. Got a little tray there where I'm going to keep all my small parts, screws, and various things. Screws come right out. Grips come off. Alright, so now our next step is there are two pins, one here and one here, one at the bottom of the mainspring and one at the top. We're going to start with the one on the bottom, and that got a really small pin punch here. They're smaller than 1/8 of an inch. That's an 1/8 of an inch pin punch, and it won't go in the hole. So you need something smaller than 1/8 of an inch. So I think this is a 1/16, but you can use a 3/32. These aren't in there they're not staked in. They'll come out pretty easy. However, there's spring pressure on this plug, and we can either push it in with our thumb to relieve it, or what I'm going to do is just push it on the bottom and hold that in, and we're going to let that spring up, and then we're going to do the same at the top and just push that out, and there's the bottom pin and top pin. Now they're different thicknesses, but I'm going to keep those straight up there. Now, be able to get that out of there. Again, there's some spring pressure on there. Kind of work that bottom part of that mag brake up a little bit. That mag brake basically curls up inside there, and the pin used to go around it, but got that loose now. Get that mag brake out of there. There you go. It's not gonna, gets a little, it'll pull that bottom one loose a little bit, but that's okay. We can fix that when we put it back together. Give that a little cleaning up. Set her aside. Okay, so now this plug, this is the mainspring plug, comes out and is open to the front. So we want to remember that when we put it back together, is that this goes back in that way. Now this is the stock mainspring, and the stock mainspring is rated for about 20 pounds, so we're going to set that aside. Now, what I have here, if you can read this, this is the Cajun Gunworks Ultra-lite self-defense kit, which has 2 springs in it, and a firing pin and a firing pin retaining pin. Now, according to the instructions, the darker spring is an 11.5 pound spring, which is lighter than the blue spring, but you're limited to Federal or Winchester primers that these will set off. The blue one is a 13 pound spring and is supposed to be able to ignite any primers, and that's coupled with the new Cajun Gunworks extended firing pin and the corresponding firing pin spring, which we're also going to install. So now we have the mainspringers removed, which leaves the trigger without any tension, which is going to help when we take out the sear cage. Now, in order to take out the sear cage, alright, so out here I've got a little jeweler's screwdriver. Now, in this, and I don't know if you can see this very well, there's a little spring, the sear spring, which rides down in a groove in the shaft of the safety, and the safety goes through the sear cage. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull that sear spring up and just set it on the sear cage. Whoops. And it's not a lot of tension on it, but it's kind of kind of wants to go where it's lived for a long time. So you may have to fiddle with it a little bit to get it up there. Once you get it up off the sear cage, it should set on the sear, just like so. Now we can, either using a punch or something similar to that, we can push this safety out, and the safety comes out, and this is the left side safety on a 75B. And with that loose, then the sear cage will lift out. Now, if you want to replace the sear, then there's a pin in the sear. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a pin in the sear that you would remove, and then the sear, which is this flat part here, you can remove. Now, if we were going to be doing a trigger job on this, there's some of these parts that we could polish, but this has had enough rounds through it that these are fairly well polished already. Now, that leaves us with our hammer, which it's not completely necessary to remove this hammer in order to replace the mainspring, but I'm going to take it out just to show you how it's done. Okay, so here we pull out this little cross pin. We're going to push that up, and it goes up into the, and comes out on the inside. You'll see it on the inside. And that little short pin holds the hammer pin in. And once that is up, you can push the hammer pin out. Now the hammer pin is going to push out that way, although this would be kind of a bear. Of course, it could be because there's a bunch of grime and crud in there that's been in there since the pistol was new. So. Now, if you can see, right there is where that pin's coming out. So, and that pin is very small, so don't lose it. But once you get it out far enough, then you should be able to drive out the hammer pin. And that might require just a little encouragement. Tap, tap with an 1/8 inch pin punch, and there we go. There's our hammer pin. There you go. I'm going to put that in my little punch tray here so I don't lose it. Now, again, that little pin where the... Now, then the hammer assembly comes out. Now, at this point, if you would want to replace this hammer, you'd have to drive out these pins. Now, from information that I've looked at from various places, these pins are in there pretty tight and they're staked in, so it's a good idea to use a starter punch. There's a couple of different methods that people have said to use to get these out. With a starter punch, I don't have one here, but set this, you could there's a couple of different ways. You could drill a hole in a board, set this on top of it, and use a starter punch to get these pins out. Now, Cajun Gunworks makes replacement pins. I actually have some, but since I'm not replacing the hammer today, I'm just going to leave those in their stock, and they feel pretty smooth. Now this disconnector is stock, and everything's looking pretty good here. While I've got everything out, I'm going to give it a good wiping down. All right. So now that's the only thing that's left in the pistol at this point is the trigger and the trigger bar. Looking at this, there's a couple of surfaces here that when you're doing a trigger job you would smooth out. Mine has been smoothed out quite a bit by time and firing a lot of shots through it. So I'm going to leave that alone because the trigger itself was always smooth. It was just, you know, it has the heavier trigger pull. Now we're going to move on to the slide. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the firing pin out, and in order to do that, there's a cross pin right here, which we're going to drive out. And there's a couple of different ways you can do that, but what I'm going to do is use my trusty roll of duct tape, and this is an 1/8 inch. So there's my 1/8 inch pin punch, and I'm going to set that on there. I'm going to drive it out. Now the firing pin should stay in there because there's a recess in that pin. So I'll get this punch out of there. Now I've left the pin sticking out of there, but I'm going to want to take that all the way out because I've got a replacement pin. There's a replacement roll pin that comes with the Cajun Gunworks kit, and this is the spring steel pin, and they won't warranty the firing pin unless you replace this. Now they say this is a heavier duty spring steel pin. If you do a lot of dry fire with your pistol, this is supposed to be the one that is not going to break. They say the stock pins will eventually break if you do a lot of live fire. Oh, and actually my firing pin already is trying to get out of there. Now on the firing pin, it'll get stuck as it pulls out with the firing pin block, and you have to depress the firing pin block in order to get it out. Now once that happens, a spring will push the firing pin block out, and we're going to pull that out. And that spring that's on there, we're going to replace that with a spring that's given to us by Cajun Gunworks. Okay, so now we've got the slide is bare, the stock firing pin is out. There's the stock firing pin. This one's still in pretty good shape, but these do have a tendency over time, they'll break where the recess goes down, which is according to Cajun Gunworks literature. So this is a S7 hardened steel firing pin that we're going to replace that with, and the firing pin spring. Now the firing pin spring did not come out when we pulled the firing pin, so it's still in the slide. So, little tap, tap, and there it is. So this is the stock firing pin spring, and we're not going to put that back in. So we're going to put that over here with the hammer spring, and I want to keep that separate from my new parts. So now the slide is basically stripped down with the exception of the extractor, which is held in by this pin, which is also staked in. If you look on the bottom, this pin is fairly well staked in. You can drive it out, it's fairly small, but there's a spring and that goes behind the ejector. The ejector feels pretty smooth, so I'm gonna leave it alone for right now. But right now we've got the slide strip, we've got the firing pin block out, and we've got the firing pin out, and I'm going to stop the video now, and I'm going to clean out this firing pin channel really good. And then also what I'm going to do is I've got some very fine sandpaper, and I'm going to polish this firing pin before it goes in, so that moves nicely in there when I put the new firing pin in. So I'll be back in a bit. Thanks. All right, we're back. I've got the firing pin channel cleaned up, and I also did a little bit of polishing along the base of this firing pin just to make sure that it fits into this channel very smoothly. Sometimes it is possible that this would bind in the channel if it's not cleaned out very well and if this is not cleaned up. So what we want to do is ensure that it's going to fit smoothly in that hole. I've got the spring on, so kind of the order of operations here is now we're going to replace the firing pin block spring with one that's supplied from Cajun Gunworks, and that's a very small spring that's in this kit. If you get this kit, be careful not to lose that spring when you're taking other stuff out of it. Now the firing pin block has a hole. The spring goes right in the hole. And then the firing pin block we're going to place back in the slide. And what we'll need to do is we'll need to hold that in as we slide in the firing pin. So you can use a screwdriver or something, but there is a, if you look down the firing pin channel, there is a, you'll see it clear the channel. So the firing pin is going to go in with the recesses towards the top of the slide. So if you see it, you see the recess in the top of the slide there, that's going to go to the top. So we're going to depress the firing pin block. We're going to slide in the firing pin, and it should go all the way in, or relatively almost all the way. And we're going to release that firing pin block. Now the firing pin block will come back towards the bottom, and that will hold the firing pin in. You can look in the hole for the pin and see the firing pin will be in that hole a little bit. Depress that a little bit, then the hole is clear, and you know you're able to put in this pin. So this pin, I think you'd want to orient it so that the slot in the pin, you want it to be up or slightly at about 2 o'clock. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get started putting this pin in. Just get it started in the hole here. And this is a brass hammer, so it shouldn't hurt anything. Now, what I want to do is I want to depress this firing pin, push it in. I've got just a little jeweler's screwdriver here. I'm going to push that in, and I want to hold it in. You can do it a number of different ways. I'm going to just stick that in there now. And then we're going to drive that all the way through. And the last little bit, I'm going to use a pin punch. And it's just flush. That's just flush. I want to take it just a little over flush. There we go, just like so. Now look at the other side. I could actually take it in there a little bit farther, which I think I will. Make sure our firing pin is still, you still should be able to push the firing pin in just a little bit. Now the other thing is to make sure that your firing pin is not protruding. But the firing pin should be able to move a little bit, even with that pin in there. So if you want to test it, you can depress the firing pin block, and then it should move in. You should be able to move it in about the width of the channel on the top of the firing pin, which is about 1/8 of an inch or a little more. So with the firing pin block, you can only push it a little bit because the firing pin block catches it, prevents the firing pin from engaging. So that's one of the safety features of the gun. So anyway, okay, so the fire pin's reinstalled, the firing pin roll pin is reinstalled. I'm going to put this in just a couple taps more there because I want it to be even, fairly even there. Actually go just a little bit more. There we go. Put About centered in that channel. Okay, so there it should be in good shape. So the firing pin's been installed. This is ready to go. I have a selection of recoil springs that I also got from Gauge and Gunworks, and I'm going to replace my stock firing pin, or my stock recoil spring, which I have here, with one of these other ones. And according to the card, the red one is about 12 pounds, and the stock's about 14. I think as a good starting point, I'm going to go with the 12. We'll see how that functions. But, so, get my plastic guide rod out of here. There we go. And we're going to put the new, there we go. And so, barrel and recoil spring. Alright, so that's reassembled and ready to go. We're going to set it aside and we're going to turn our attention back to the lower half because we're going to start putting it back together. So right now everything on this is good to go. Got some parts as parts here. There is my hammer. So the hammer is going to go back in, and that sets down in the channel. Make sure your disconnector's setting upwards, and you can push this down until you see, until you get your hole lined up. And then we're going to take the hammer pin, which has a large end on it. We're going to slide the hammer pin in. There should be any spring tension on this, so you may have to fiddle around with it a little bit. There we go. So there the hammer pin's going in. Good little press seated home. Now, once you're done getting the hammer pin in, come up top and push your retaining pin back in so the cross pin is back here, if you look. I don't know if you can see that, the light's not very good, but that cross pin, and you'll know what I'm talking about, needs to be pushed back down. Okay, so now we're ready to reinstall the sear. Now, don't put any springs in it yet. So the sear is going to, we're ready to reinstall the sear, and the blade part of the sear goes to the back. So we're going to set the sear in place. And we're going to center up the sear hole. Now the spring has fallen back down into that recess, which is okay because the safety will push in under it. So we're going to line up the hole, and you'll see the holes here. And I'm just holding a little pressure down on the sear. Then take your safety, install your safety, and it won't go all the way in because of the detent, but what you can do is take a little jeweler's scribe and then push in on the detent for the safety and push it the rest of the way in. So now the little spring right in here should clip into the groove in the safety, and now our safety is installed. So there we go. Now we're ready to go back together with some other stuff here since the sear's in. It's easier to replace this, pull the sear cage in and out if you have the mainspring out. If you don't have the mainspring out, it's kind of like a monkey messing with a football trying to get it back in there. So it takes 4 hands and 10 long skinny fingers. But anyway, so now we're ready to go back together with the lower part of this. And I'm going to go with the 11.5 pound spring out of the kit, which is the darker spring. And I'm just going to feed this up onto the hammer strut, and you can see how that fits right up in there. So That goes up, and then there's a little stop for it. Now, magazine brake, we're going to bend this tab back up just a little bit because that's going to engage on the pin again, and we're going to set the magazine brake in, and we're going to set the pin in for the top of the magazine brake so that we know that it's in the hole. There we go, and it should set in there just fine. Alright, this mag brake spring takes a little bit of finagling around. You need to straighten out the bottom tang on the magazine brake. Leave the top pin out. I had stuck it in earlier, so that makes it, there's a little slot where that slides down, and then you can slide the pin in, and with the pin up, all the way pushed in, we're going to slide in the retaining pin. Easier said than done. There we go, now it's in, and that will hold the, and I've installed the 11.5 pound hammer spring, which is there. Now I can secure the top of the mag brake. Now you want to make sure that the bottom of the mag brake is sitting down in the slots. Now make sure that your upper hole for your mag brake is on top of the mag brake, and then install your pin. It just slides in flush. It's just retained by the. Now, you want to make sure that this mag brake is going to settle down in the slot. And once you get this pin in, then you can kind of push that down, and the bottom tang will kind of curl up in there. So we want that mag brake. We don't want it to be interfering with the mags falling out of the gun. So, alright, so that's, now that that's installed, we have spring again on all of our, everything appears to be working. Safety works, trigger works, mag brake is or the mag release is working, and our mag brake is installed, and looks like it's setting in an appropriate way not to interfere with mags dropping out of there well. So, alright, so we're almost completely assembled. So what I've done so far is replace the mainspring, replace the firing pin, and replace this recoil spring with a 12 pounder. So now this gun is ready for assembly. Okay. And what did I do with my grease? Okay, there it is. So I've got a little all-weather high-tech shooter's choice gun grease, and I'm going to give this a little right on the slide, just a little bit, wipe off the excess a little bit, same thing on this side, just a little bit free, slide, give that a little rubbing in. Nice and smooth. This is good all-weather grease, so it's not supposed to get, when it's cold out, it's not supposed to lock up, and when it gets hot out, it's not supposed to gum up. Oh, that slides in there, nice. Okay, so now we're going to pull this back to half cock. Line up our notches again, and insert our slide stop. Alright, so now that's back together. The only thing we have to do now is put the grips back on, and we're ready to go. And we will test see how well we did with our trigger pull weight. All right. And there we have it. And it is assembled. Wow, that feels really good. That is the double action trigger pull. That is a single action trigger pull. Wow, it feels a lot lighter already. All right, now the proof's in the pudding. Now we're going to measure again and see what kind of change we made. Actually, I think I need to adjust this a little bit to make sure that it's working right. So. Alright, so I'm just re-zeroing my, this is actually a fish scale. See if I can get this zeroed out a little bit better. Okay, so before we started we had about an 11 or close to 12 pound double action trigger pull. And we're going to see what the kit brought. Now I didn't use the 11.5 pound spring out of the Cajun Gunworks kit. This one is, it says, it cautions to that it will reliably ignite Federal and Winchester primers, but not some of the harder primers. So if you use some of the harder primers, this blue spring in the kit is probably what you want to use. Anyway, so there we have it. So now we're going to test our trigger pull. I got to rig up my contraption here again. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do this a little different this time. Make it a little longer. Too big here. Okay. Get that. These are high-tech pipe cleaners, by the way. I'm just making a knot in this one, so I'm just going to make a longer loop so it makes it a little easier to. Alright, so here we have, we're just making a loop. There we go. Tie another square knot in there. Zips that up a little bit. Okay, so now, boy, that feels really light. Alright, so now, again, we were about 12 pounds before that. That's starting to pull at about 7. Yeah. I don't know if you can see the scale here, but right now that's pulling at about 7, which is about a 4-pound improvement. So there's 6, 7, there it goes. So yeah, so that's a significant improvement over what we had. While we're at it, let's do the single action. I don't think it'll have changed much. Single action, there's just over 4. So very nice. Well, one last thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that our firing pin is actually poking out like it's supposed to. What we're going to do for that is I've got a pencil that we're going to insert in the barrel, and it's all the way down on the breech face. Now if we watch the pencil and pull the trigger, yes, we're getting a movement. So there's an imprintation on the eraser. We'll try single action. There we go. So we're getting operation of primer as we see the pencil move. Single action. There we go. And double action. There we go. All right, all in all, I'm pretty happy. That trigger feels really nice. There we go. CZ75B Cajun Gunworks Ultra-lite self-defense kit. We've installed the 11.5 pound hammer spring and the updated firing pin and firing pin retaining pin. And we brought this from about a 11-12 pound double action pull down to about a 6.5-7 pound pull. And then the single action, I think it came down about a pound. So we're probably, I don't have a real accurate gauge, but the fish scale says less than 4 pounds single action pull and about 7 pounds on the double action pull. And since I've got so many rounds through this one's still pretty smooth. It always has been smooth, but this hasn't had any other trigger work to it other than just the spring hit. So I've got a match on Sunday. I'm going to do a little range testing with this and make sure everything works like it's supposed to, but so far it feels pretty good. All right. If you have any questions, post your comments in the comments section, subscribe, and I'll probably be coming out with some more videos. So thanks for watching.